Hi, I'm Jackie Bernard, Programs Assistant at Uncle Don's Cabin Historic Site, the home of Josiah Henson. And I am so excited to share with you a series of videos we filmed called Discovering Don. The short videos are a look at the contributions that African Canadians have made to the development of my hometown, Dresden, Ontario. The town was a final destination for hundreds of refugees from American slavery. We had the pleasure of working with local historian Marie Carter. Marie, this was always one of my favorite streets, walking to and from school as a child, Hughes Street. And doesn't it look beautiful on this fall day?
Oh, it does. It does. Beautiful day. And beautiful old homes on this street. You know, like we have some wonderful old Victorian style homes that are still very well maintained here. And it's a wonderful street to walk down. But especially because of its connections to the whole story of the British American Institute. As you know, we're walking on what used to be British American Institute ground when we're walking down this street. Now, you know, this side of the street particularly was part of the last properties ever sold by the British American Institute. It was set aside for a time and known as the Wilberforce Reserve lands. And people were very anxious to get this property because it was some of the best property on the BAI because it was on high ground. And so it was kind of known as a hill, even though this is very flat territory in this area. And eventually became known as Quality Hill because of these grand houses that were built here by some of the leading industrialists of Dresden. The two houses we've just walked by, for instance, are from the McInnes family, who really put Dresden on the map in the 1890s. But their whole existence here is due to that Wilberforce land being sold to them back in the 1871. Now you'd expect, because we have this time frame where the British American Institute was sold in 1871, that you would think all the houses on the street would date from after that time. But we have this curious house here, which incidentally has a very clear link to Josiah Henson, which was built in 1860 or thereabouts. And actually, the reason that we can have a house that's older than what's possible in terms of the Institute's timeline is because this house has been moved. Not once, but twice.
This is not the original site.
No. Originally, this house was on Metcalfe Street. And if you can remember from one of our earlier segments when we were talking about the William Whipper cottage, this house sat right next door to William Whipper's cottage. And incidentally, Josiah Henson also owned property across the road from this house on Metcalfe Street. So it's all within that community, in that area of the town. And then the house has moved from Metcalfe to the main street of Dresden, which is today St. George, and then moved here in about 1920. But back when it was still on Metcalfe Street, it was the home of Martha Webster, the widow of George Webster, who then married a surgeon who had some experience with the Civil War. And he and she established this as the McInnes surgery. So he was a doctor, medical doctor. And they lived in this home. And Martha was known, along with her husband George previously, as being quite sympathetic to the freed population here at Dresden. And this fact is mentioned by Mary Ann Shadd Carey as one of the friends that people should, you know, frequent their store because they're good to us, so go there. And so you have this really early example of a white couple who are freely interacting with the Black community all around them, and in fact are inviting people like Josiah Henson into their home. And the reason we know this is because of their son Tom. Now, Tom McInnes is a really interesting character. He starts out in Dresden as the son of Martha and her second husband, along with his brother Bill. And they lived in this house for a time when Henson had his property across the street. And Tom tells how, when they were little boys, Josiah Henson would come to the house and he would sit them on his knee and he'd tell them these fantastic stories that would, you know, really stuck with Tom through his whole life. The other thing that really stuck with Tom, too, is that Henson liked to sing. And he recalled that Henson was humming a tune that he said sounded something like "Hard Times Come Again No More." And in a letter that he attached to a book of poetry that he later wrote and donated to the Dresden Library, he explains how, he thought that this was an old slave spiritual, not knowing that it was actually the words to a Stephen Foster tune. But anyway, McInnes was so taken with Henson and this whole experience of his childhood that he wrote in one of his 3 volumes of poetry called In Amber Lands, he wrote a poem called Hard Times Come Again No More. It was dedicated to Henson. So it's an interesting little story that talks about interracial cooperation, gives us a glimpse of Henson as just this very loving man who liked children, loved to tell stories, and loved to laugh. And I think it's just that nice little slice of life. And this house is a wonderful reminder of all these tremendous stories that we have. And also very important because of where it sits on the British American Institute. I can't think of any more fitting place for it to have ended up.